An American lawyer is now going to be serving prison in Hong Kong. And you may be asking yourself, how did this happen? Well, it all stems back from the unrest that was taking place between China and Hong Kong. Now, we know that the global power structure in that part of the world is changing pretty rapidly, and we're following along here and there. But what happened here is this attorney, his name is Samuel Bickett, 37 years old. He was over there. He's somebody who sort of works in this space over at the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. He's a compliance director, was a compliance director. And as a lot of this stuff was unfolding, there was an altercation that took place. So he was there. We're going to watch the video, but they're sort of down in a subway. And this altercation happens, and this attorney, Samuel, goes and sort of pulls this baton out of a man's hand. Well, it turns out that man was a police officer, but you don't know it at the time because, first of all, he's not wearing any police identification. He's not wearing a uniform. He's in totally plain clothes. And you'll also notice as we get to the video that there's another man there who's sort of yelling at the officer, not knowing he's an officer, saying, "Are you a popo? Are you popo?" And I'm thinking, hey, that's the word we use here all the time. He's saying, "Are you popo?" And the cop doesn't respond. And then this altercation breaks out. We have our attorney friend, Samuel Bickett, who gets involved. And now, of course, because he was involved with a police officer, the allegations were assault on an officer. And so he went through the whole process over there, the entire, pseudo justice system that they've got. And he is now being sentenced to prison in Hong Kong for this. So let's take a look at what's going on here. This is coming over from the Washington Post. American lawyer, we can see him here. His name is Samuel Bickett. He's 37 years old. He's ordered to serve 4 months and 2 weeks, so 4.5 months after being convicted and denied bail last month. So he's been in custody for some time. He's a corporate lawyer. He was sentenced to prison in Hong Kong on Tuesday for assaulting a plainclothes police officer. This happened back in 2019 during pro-democracy protests in the city. And so, all right, let's get into it. It says the former compliance director at the Bank of Merrill Lynch was on his way to dinner late 2019. He saw a man hitting a teenager with a baton, and he stopped to intervene. The assailant turned out to be an off-duty policeman. Altercation between the man, identified later as Yu Shu Sang, and other bystanders ensued. So we're going to watch the clip here. Here is the attorney. You can see him. That's him. His name is Samuel Bickett, age 37. And so he's wearing a mask over there. He's standing right outside the Eastern Law Courts building, which you can see here. And this is the actual video of the incident. So what we're going to see here, the man in the blue sweater is Samuel Philip Bickett. Okay, this guy right here. So we're going to see him, right? He jumps on top of this guy, and you're going to notice that he kind of comes out of the frame this direction. So we're going to blow this up a little bit bigger here on the next slide. But the altercation starts over on this side of the screen, and then it's between this officer who's lying on the ground and another person. And then Samuel Bickett just kind of jumps out of nowhere and kind of, helps kind of defray the situation, pulls this officer over the ground, and then kind of, pops him one right in the face. Now, as you're going to see, this officer just gets totally embarrassed. I mean, embarrassed. And we've talked about this a lot here on the show. This is happening over in Hong Kong, but we've talked about it here. The one that I think of most readily, of course, is Rayshard Brooks. Remember that happened? Rayshard Brooks was shot in the back from like 21 feet away because those two officers got embarrassed. They tried to arrest him, and he sort of overpowered them, ran away. And I know a lot of people don't disagree with that analysis, but I don't think that shooting was justified. And of course, that officer is being prosecuted right now. But anytime that happens, right? Anytime an officer sort of gets sort of taken advantage of, I've seen this in our system many times. The system responds, and I mean they respond hard. You ever see that where there's an officer involved chase? There's an officer involved shooting. Let's say a defendant shoots an officer, right? And that officer is killed. And that defendant, that person allegedly who did the shooting, is now, fleeing around the country. He's on a highway road going whatever, there's a standoff at some resident or something like that. They never find that guy alive, right? Almost never. They usually find him with about 257 bullet holes in him, because that's just what happened. Oh, you shot one of our guys? Well, that's it. We're not going to court on this thing. Are you nuts? Yeah, so I think he's in that building over there. Everybody just unloads. All right, well, that's the end of that building. So same thing kind of happens here. This officer gets totally embarrassed, and now they're going to make sure that this American lawyer, which is, of course, this is all happening in Hong Kong, which is now sort of China too, is going to pay the price for it. And we have, well, not much of a response here from anybody in the United States. We have a U.S. citizen that is sort of being abused here, and it's just all quiet on the Western Front. So let's see what is happening here. Again, this is the officer, right? And he kind of gets flipped over the rail. Let's watch what happens.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Right, show what are you doing? Show me. Are you Popo? Are you Popo? No. You don't know. Are you Popo? Yes. No, you can't. Get the police! Bring the police! Bring the police! You stay there. Bring the police! Police! Bring the police!
All right, and so you can see right about here, right? This guy is shouting. So this guy's the cop, and this guy comes up and he's shouting back at him, and you could hear him in the video. We'll play it again when we read a little bit more. But he says, "Are you Popo? Are you Popo? Are you Popo?" Right? And the other guy's shouting back at him, "You're in the way. Get out of the way," or something. Right? It's hard to tell. And then it just sort of goes bad from there. There's a baton there. It looks like we have the lawyer, Bickett, kind of come in and try to sort of seize that baton. The officer is holding on to it. He gets flipped over the thing. And so then we see the rest of the ordeal. He gets charged with a crime. Bickett is now charged with the crime. And then on today, during the court date, we have magistrate, who's the judge, Arthur Lamb. He called Bickett's acts a serious threat to public order. Okay, which is... all right, citing multiple injuries suffered by the police officer. As the assault happened in a, quote, crowded area, according to the judge, Bickett's actions could have affected others' emotions and incited a bigger conflict. Oh, man, I wonder if he's talking about like an insurrection or something. He says in his verdict last month, Lamb said the officer was not concealing his identity and could not have been expected to respond as the crowd was disrespectfully asking him if he was Popo, a slang term for the police. Oh my gosh, so disrespectful. Bickett, Lamb said, was not acting in self-defense, but simply wanted to snatch the baton, which you can kind of see that, to be fair. Let's watch this again. I think it's hilarious, though, that this judge is just so offended, right? You called him a Popo. That's slang. That's disrespectful. And you can't even expect an officer to identify himself if you are being so disrespectful in public. And so, of course, he was not going to respond. And now you're going to go to prison for it. Let's watch that one more time, shall we? Here it is. And again, let's watch what happens with Beckett. Okay, he comes in from this side, and let's see if it looks like it was a self-defense, or is he just kind of jumping in there? Let's take a look. Watch it one more time.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Right, show what are you doing? Show me. Are you Popo? Are you Popo? No. You don't know. Are you Popo? Yes. No, you can't. Get the police! Bring the police! Bring the police! You stay there. Bring the police! Police! Bring the police!
All right, so quick point on this. It does kind of look like he kind of lunged at that baton, doesn't it? It kind of looks like he just kind of went right after it. And that's not the right thing to do, right? You can't do that. Now, at the same time, you've also got the police officer who comes down, and you can see him actually poke that other guy right in the chest, right? We'll watch that quickly one more time. Pokes him, right? Saw that? Kind of pokes him, and he kind of nudges him up and says, "Hey, you're in the way, you're in the way." And he says, "Are you a police officer? How dare you? Who are you poking in the chest? Do you have any authority to tell me to move or to get out, to relocate?" And he doesn't respond. He kind of says, he might have said no there. And then Beckett, of course, comes in, or Bickett comes in and sort of, pulls the baton away from him. Now, the response there would be, well, that was an assault either way, right? Bickett was going after that baton, and he was assaulting that person. Which maybe you could say yes. Maybe you could say, in fact, Bickett was doing that. Bickett, maybe he should not have done that. And you could say, well, a regular assault would have been justified there. Let's say that this guy was not a police officer and there was just a regular assault. The question, of course, would then become, would Bickett have ever even been charged if this was just some random guy out there, right? If this was some guy, randomly just walking down the stairs and he gets into this altercation, Bickett comes, rips the baton out from him, and it's just a regular guy. Nothing happens, right? He doesn't get charged with anything. Or if a police officer is standing there, he sees that and he says, oh, you can't do that. You're trying to take somebody's property away from them. That's a problem. So he charges him with a crime, but it would be assault, right? It wouldn't be a regular sort of an aggravated assault on a police officer. So, I'm not sure how they do their law, of course, in Hong Kong or China, but in the United States, there are severe penalties when you do anything bad against a police officer. Okay, if we get into a fight in the middle of the road or at a bar or something at a sporting event, and it's between me and another person, that's just kind of a regular fight. Maybe we both get charged with assault. But if I punch a regular person, it's just assault. If I punch an officer, that's aggravated assault. Okay, it goes from maybe a lower level misdemeanor into something that is a very serious felony. And so they aggravate the charges dramatically when you're dealing with a police officer. So if we apply that same concept over here to Bickett, if Bickett was just pulling the baton from some jerk who was in the subway, well, that's a separate thing. Maybe it's a low level misdemeanor, nobody bats an eye. Here, obviously, that's not the case. The problem here is that Bickett didn't know it was an officer. Maybe he would not have responded the way that he did if he had in fact known. And so he's at a total disadvantage. He sees somebody who's coming down here with a weapon and jabbing somebody else in the chest, and he says, I'm gonna step in and do something about this. Turns out, wrong move, because it was a police officer. Now, Bickett, of course, is saying that this is outrageous. He's right. He says that this is a violation of legal precedent. The former prosecutor in his case over from Hong Kong, he added, told his defense team that the charges were pursued because Bickett had embarrassed the police, which is exactly right? As I said, if this were not a police officer, probably wouldn't have even been charged. The whole thing would have just gone by nobody would have even talked about it. But it's an officer, and you saw what happened to him. He just got flipped right over that thing. I'm going to go, I'm going to be tough with you. And he just got flipped over and then totally embarrassed. So, good luck to that guy. But meanwhile, Bickett is going to spend some time in prison. His defense lawyer, we went over to South China Morning Post. It says that his defense lawyer said in mitigation on Tuesday, which would be during the sentencing hearing, that Bickett was a young person who works hard, had a clean record before the case. He pleaded for leniency so his client could resume work and continue providing financial support for his retired mother who had difficulties moving around, right? This is pretty standard kind of sentencing stuff. He's young, 37. It's good. It means I'm pretty young too. And he's got a clean record, right? You talk about that at every sentencing, asking for mitigation, asking for leniency. Sounds like they had already gone through a trial and he had already lost. So those arguments had already been made. His defense team now, they asked for a 2-week jail term. Bickett had already served after being remanded into custody on June 22nd after the conviction. So he was out of custody, lost the trial in June, got taken into custody, been in there for 2 weeks, got sentenced today, and the judge today just said, oh, you get another 4.5 months. Assaulting a police officer, he says, is punishable by up to 6 months imprisonment. So this guy basically got 5 of the 6, okay? 2 weeks in since June 22nd, another 4.5 months, 5 months of the 6. So he's almost the max, almost there for what you just saw in that video. He's got a fine of 5,000 HK over in Hong Kong, and Lam pointed out the seriousness of Bickett's offense. He said, including trying to snatch the officer's baton and kneeling on his chest, which caused multiple injuries. Weakling. He said police must be protected from abuse while on duty, but nobody could tell he was on duty. Hello. Otherwise, law and public order would be threatened. We have Devin Kennington, Chief of American Citizen Services at the U.S. Consulate in Hong Kong. He urged the city's government to maintain judicial independence outside the court on Tuesday. The city, he wants to maintain independence in Hong Kong. Independence from whom, I wondered. He says the U.S. Consulate, in a quote, urges the Hong Kong government to protect judicial independence, ensure the courts are free from political interference, and respect a fair trial guarantee for all individuals. Do you think that's happening over there right now? Do you think that the U.S. consulate is really, twisting the levers of international diplomacy to make sure that the Chinese vis-a-vis the Hong Kong vis-a-vis the Chinese are playing ball here? Or is this something where they're just going to say, well, it's an American, he kind of embarrassed one of our officers, how dare you? 4.5 months, making a 5-month total term, and the U.S. consulate says, okay, well, just make sure you're free from political interference. So the question is, what started all this? And is this looking familiar to anybody? Let's see. We've got unrest, or according to the Washington Post. They give us some background on this story. They say that the unrest really started up in Hong Kong in June 2019. It was prompted by an extradition bill that residents feared would remove the firewall between the city's courts, which is based on English common law and China's judicial system, right? In Hong Kong, June 2019, the Chinese come in. There's a new bill that's going to eliminate the lines that have been drawn in the sand between China and Hong Kong courts, which are based on English common law. Now the judicial system is going to be answering to China's ruling Communist Party. Beijing has characterized the spontaneous protest as the work of meddlesome foreign countries in Hong Kong. Those democracies are the worst. In response, Chinese and Hong Kong authorities moved to curb the city's freedoms. How does that sound? Does that fit? In Chinese and Hong Kong, in response, they moved to curb China's freedoms. Most notably, how'd they do that? Through a national security law. That was imposed last year. They also want to overhaul the electoral system. Okay. So they're going to overhaul the electoral system, and then they're going to freeze the assets of a pro-democracy newspaper. So that's going to get shut down. So let's see here. What is China doing? So China, sort of a communist state. Hong Kong, more analogous to a democratic state. China comes in, says, we're just going to eliminate your justice system, because that's a pretty good way to start getting control over everything, isn't it? I say this often, that here in the United States, when the government touches you in that bad spot, it's either the IRS or law enforcement. And so if you can sort of reform the justice system to work in your favor, to further your political ideology, it's a good place to start, because everything else will trickle down from there. If you can control criminal law, you can control behavior throughout society, because you just criminalize something that you don't like, and everybody has to respond to that. You criminalize speech, you criminalize going to church, you criminalize not putting a mask on, and the list goes on and on. And so China's very clearly doing that. They have a national security law that was being imposed, and we're hearing a lot of that same type of stuff here, aren't we? We're hearing about domestic violent extremists. We're hearing about domestic terrorism now. Nancy Pelosi just formed a select committee to investigate all of that domestic terrorism that's going on. And so that's happening around the clock. We have this new effort to really focus on gun violence again. It's sort of a new form of violence. Joe Biden told us a lot about this back in the 1980s and 90s about drug violence, and now it's just gun violence now. So that's morphed. So he's going to renew that one, another rerun there from Joe. And that's just sort of the national security law. China's got one. U.S. is working on it. And in China, you'll notice they also wanted to overhaul the electoral system. Remember that? So overhaul just the entire electoral system, because once you've got control of the justice system, and once you've got the ability to pass national laws that can criminalize certain behavior, well, you can just move right on over to elections now. Reform the electoral system, kind of like what was trying to be done here under H.R. 1 when the Democrats were trying to federalize elections nationally. So we're still working hard on that. Don't know if they're going to be able to get that done or not, but China's doing it. So yeah, I guess we should do it here also. So that's good. And then lastly, of course, we see here that they are freezing the assets belonging to a pro-democracy newspaper, leading it to shut down. In other words, you can't speak, you can't talk, you can't get out there and express your opinions lest you be eliminated, shut down, thrown off the internet, like many people, like a sitting president in this country was. In fact, like many people who have ever voiced and expressed their concern or a little bit of trepidation, skepticism about one of some of our elected, saviors have told us is the case. Well, you're somebody who is dangerous now, and you're harmful. And now what we need to do is shut you down. And you just have this perfect domino effect, just the trifecta, just cascading totalitarianism rolling down your country. And we've got a good model here about what happened in China and Hong Kong. So since the protests, more than 10,000 people have been arrested. About a quarter have been charged, 780 convicted, police data show. And that's how you eliminate your opposition party. China's got a good model for that. Let's take a look at some questions over on the chat. We're going to jump to the most recent messages and then see what is going on up here. We have Todd Trout is in the house, says, when in foreign countries, would it not be better to not interfere? You don't know their laws and customs. I think that's a good point, right? I agree with that. Now, this guy may have been over there a lot because he was a financial advisor. He was somebody who was working, I think, with Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. And so, they've got conglomerates or headquarters all over the country. And so maybe he was a little bit more familiar with their customs. Maybe he was familiar with the laws and he just picked the wrong guy. It's just a bad situation. Ken Innit says, I'm with John Rich. If someone knocks on the door talking about vaccines, invite them in, talk about Jesus, following by a long, slow reading of the Constitution. Yeah, you should get your pocket Constitution right here everywhere you go, and you just read it ever so slowly, and you just open it up right here. Carry this with you everywhere you go. They come to your door, hey, vaccine here, and you say, hold on, let me open this up here to let's see here, amendments. You can pick this over. Well, I can't really find it right now because I don't know how this book works. Let's see here. But you get the picture, right? You get this little pocket Constitution. You're going to open this sucker up to the Fourth Amendment, wherever the heck it is in here. And you say, we are free from unreasonable searches and seizures. I'm not interested. And I don't answer those questions, which is rule number 3.1 in law enforcement interaction training. All right, good questions. All right, let's see what else is going on here. We have Ghost Gunner, who says, didn't they say he was actually off duty? Yeah, he was off duty, which is, well, I'm not sure if the court said that. Yeah, so the court said that he was a police officer and you can't embarrass a police officer and this is problematic and how dare you, and that therefore you're going to go to prison for 5 months. But now I don't know if they know that he was off duty. I'm presuming they do, and they probably don't care. I think that's really the answer. They just don't care. They just say, well, he was an officer. So it doesn't matter on duty, off duty, sleeping, driving, right? Whatever. If you dare, how dare you offend a police officer? You're in big trouble. We got Sharon Quidney says, Robert, oh, please, says, we're talking about China here. Do you seriously think anybody could get any real justice in China? Dear Moral, don't go to China. Don't buy their products. That's from Sharon Quidney. Let's say hello to Sharon right there. What's up, Sharon? Good to see you. We have moral of the story from ZZ the Boxing Cat says, never help your fellow citizen. It can get messy. We have High Desert says, if there is any doubt, there is no doubt. Remove the doubt before you act by giving commands and asking questions. It's a good point on that. We have Be Brave says, and we are becoming more like the CCP every day. We are following the same model. Criminal law, elections, everything else follows naturally. We've got Three Girlies who says, I remember a teenage who was publicly caned in Singapore in 1993. Whoa. And China salivates over charging Americans. He's being charged like this to stop others from protesting. Yeah, it's a signal, right? It sort of chills speech a little bit, and it sort of chills, people from ever wanting to get involved in any of this stuff, because now you've got a citizen who just gets, arrested, and he's going to go away for 4 months in a Hong Kong prison. So we'll see, we'll see what happens with that. Let's see. Sharon says, actually, give it a couple years, and it won't be that different here than in China. It's already there in many ways. ZZ the Boxing Cat says he works with Hunter Biden. And let's see, Be Brave. Okay, so great questions. Good to see everybody over there. What's up, Joe? What's up? Want to know. And I see Three Girl. Good to see you all. All right, so those questions all are great questions. They all came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is our home away from YouTube. But we also have another home. It's called the R&R Law Group. This is where we do criminal law. We love helping good people facing criminal charges. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona, but we can help people all over the state of Arizona with any type of criminal charge that somebody might be facing, including things like felonies and DUIs and drug charges and domestic violence and all of those types of criminal activity. activity that happens, we can help people navigate their way through the system and really help them find the results that they deserve. So I want to invite you to come and give our office a call if you need some help, 480-787-0394. The website is rrlawaz.com. You can go right online. You can schedule an appointment online if you want. You can click this QR code, take a picture of that with your phone. You can click this button for a free consultation, and we'll make sure that we are ready and available to help. We're absolutely passionate about what we do. We love to help good people. We'd love to speak with you or somebody that you know or love and you know they need some help. If you're not interested or don't need any legal services, that's a good thing. You may be interested in some informational offerings. In particular, check out law enforcement interaction training available now over at gumroad.com/Robert Grueller, along with some other programs. If you're a lawyer or somebody who's a legal professional, we meet twice a month to talk about law firms and about being better advocates and about using some YouTube and some things to go and make a stand and become a better advocate. It's a lot of fun. We got a good group of people. It's over at gumroad.com/Robert Grueller. All right. And thank you everybody for joining me on that segment. Okay, so let's change gears.